from other people. And then you'll see later on the parts that I've done myself and where, it becomes more shabby in the end. So let's see the presentation. You'll have to tell me if it looks all right to you.
Yeah, we can see it, yes.
So that's the first slide. So, but that's the So the Cultural School Bag was established in 2001 as a national system in Norway. But there were already some regional initiatives in some of the counties. So there was already some local programs running in Norway for art for young people, for pupils. And there were some national programs running with some dissemination from big institutions all around the countries. But with the Cultural School Bag, all regions got fundings, but also the responsibility of providing art and culture for pupils during their school hours. My organization was established in between 2016 and 2018, so it's quite new. Let's see. Okay, I have to press here. Good. So here you see what is Kulturtanken. So Kulturtanken is a national governmental agency with the national responsibility of bringing professional art and culture to children and youth. The Cultural School Bag is quite complex because it's both a national system, a national responsibility. There's a responsibility in the counties, and there's a responsibility in the municipalities. But my organization did not produce any art. We are more on the research and development side where I work, and also on the competence and experience sharing, and on the more sort of governmental kind of like the reports, the money. There's a good word for it in English, but I don't remember. Yes, and we are in the middle of education and culture, and that also means that there's always some fresh debates about what's most important when it comes to art for young people. Oh yeah, there, next slide. Yeah, so I already said this since 2001, so it's the 20-year celebration this year. And we have an average of 3 art experiences per pupil a year. But I have to say we're also in a decreasing pace now, because the costs are increasing more than the funding. So that's a challenge. There's a great local relevance and ownership. It means that as a state agency, we're like in dialogue with the counties, but there's a lot of autonomy on the municipality and county level. And it's a very important system for artists. As you see, there's between 3,000 and 4,000 artists engaged every year. So it's a part of their dissemination economy of Norway. And here's some figures in euros. I'm just presuming they are correct. But there's some funding coming from the lottery money that Kulturtanken is giving out, and there's also some regional funding. So it also means that the different regions are prioritizing this differently. We have a system where it's 3 fields of art and culture, which is disseminated, and also sometimes in as a mix. So I'll just read my own slide. So it's performing arts, visual arts, music, film, literature, and cultural heritage. So that's why we always have to try to remember to say art and culture, and not just art. And these are, it's exciting because these are very different kind of meetings and happening in the schools while music has a tradition to engage the whole school in an event. We see that with visual arts, it's often classroom size and a lot of dialogue. Now I've got some background noise. I don't know if you still hear me. Echo for a moment. Tell me if the sounds gets worse. So our challenge is always not challenge, but our excited ambition, not that either, but our mandate towards the pupils is to give them an offer of high artistic quality, and also then to reflect the diversity of gender and cultural expressions. What we see in the cultural school bag that makes it very exciting is that since it's a cross-sectoral collaboration, the discussion around the quality has many different sizes, different voices. So there's the voice of the pupils that we are now doing work to give a bigger space to the pupils' own experience and what they think is relevant. Then there's the teachers, obviously, and also the cultural sector. So personally, I like that. I like it when you have to have this sort of space of dissent where I think that's a good space to do something really great. So it's been exciting times in Norway. In June, the new white paper on children and young people's culture was presented to the parliament. It's something that the field has been waiting for a long time. And myself, I was working on one of a pre-report to this white paper, where we involved 1,000 children and youth to give their own opinions and share their experiences about art and culture, which became like this report with 23 different points that reflected the sort of opinions that we've met talking to children and young people. And I want to say, unfortunately, this report was presented in June when we knew after the summer we'd have a new government. So we're very anxious to see how the new government will react to or how they will work in the continuation of this white paper. And what we also see here with this white paper, well, not that we see, but what's interesting is that it's a collaboration between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Culture. And that's always been a challenge for the cultural school back, that it's financed by the Ministry of Culture, but it's happening on the sort of grounds of the Ministry of Education. So their collaboration on this white paper is a really, whatever happens in the future, it's a good starting point to further develop the quality of the system. And yeah, so you see there's some new, I can just tell you there's some new points here that raised a lot of debate. Before it used to be highlighted that the art had to be professional, but the Minister of Culture thought that high quality would sort of be good enough in a way. So that was the big talking point after this paper was presented, that the word professional was taken out. It was a big grief for many professional artists and people in the culture field. Although, yeah, so it wasn't anticipated from the ministry that it would be such a debate about that. Yeah, I won't go through the points because you probably already read them while I was talking. So let's see. And the other exciting thing that's happening in Norway that affects the cultural school bag is that we have a new curriculum in the schools, which has the ambition to strengthen the practical and aesthetic subjects, and has also introduced 3 new cross-cutting themes in the new educational plan. You see this: public health and life skill, democracy and citizenship, and sustainability. And there's quite a lot of interest on how the cultural school bag can be linked more to these crossover subjects instead of this sort of more. It's been a little bit hard to find the best way to support the curricula. And yeah, good with the comments. We'll talk about them later. I just want to say I just got a report on this sort of more long-term cultural school bag project in the school where artists stay for a year, and you can see that this sort of idea of life skill is something that is very strongly supported in this report, that the art activities in schools has an effect on this sort of life skill topic. Something we're trying to work more and more systematically with is the competence of teacher to use art and culture in their own teaching and make them meaningful towards their own topics. And we have this research project going on where I'm a little bit involved. And it's really about this sort of competence, but also the space of action and the confidence of teachers, generalist teachers, when they're meeting the cultural school bag. And so it's that's the sort of, I guess, the aim, a new generation of teachers that are more familiar with art and cultural experiences as a way of mode of teaching. And I included this slide as well, just to say that because from now on, this is kind of the last pre-pandemic slide. Now we're going into this topic. But I wanted to say that the question of digital art and culture has been on the mind kind of my organization from before COVID. When we were funded, we had this sort of very strong strategic aim to explore the sort of digital dissemination format and see how that as a way of creating relevance to children and young people. And we had a 3-year project that we called FONT, F-O-N-T, which is like an acronym for dissemination and new technology, where we had collaboration with different countries and art and cultural institutions to explore and create offers that use technology in the meeting with pupils. And this project, I guess, is the one that I keep thinking about and that we might try to develop further as a more like a national offer. And it was like a game-based after, in Norway we say etterarbeid, which is like after work, because that's been the big challenge in the cultural school bag the whole way, is to make the experience last. What happens when the artists leave the room? Because the experience, well, the practice many places is that then it's like, okay, yeah, hurry up, next class is PT, and you are already late. So there's very little time for this sort of making the experience last and reflect upon it and create your own kind of reflection and ownership to it. And it's very then dependent on the teacher's own interest and competence towards art and culture. And this little device was like a little game that you could either play on your phone or in a web browser. And it's a multi-choice kind of narrative. It's non-linear, and it asks you questions about ethics. And in a way, then it goes straight into the main theme of the performance that's called La Salol, that you can see the picture of, where a girl, 12-year-old girl, is standing in some existential choices that really define who she is. And we had some really interesting feedback from the students, from the pupils, that it gave them a feeling of being a protagonist in their own story while watching. They were looking at her playing out her story. So there was like a really nice little shift of it was kind of this, it was the same topic and the same question, but there was a shift of going from being an observer to making choices yourself. And also we could see that it was a practical tool for the teachers. So that's something we're looking at now, how to do this kind of general kind of little digital tool that can accompany the school bag, but not just one show, many. Yes. So now this is the moment where we're jumping to the main theme of the presentation. Here you see a map of Norway, and to be quite honest, the picture of Norway here, I just took it because I had it, so it doesn't reflect any particular COVID situation here. I'm sorry. I think maybe it's how Sami art is being disseminated in the cultural school bag, different places. You see the greener, the more percentage of Sami art in the cultural school bag. While the numbers on the other side reflects the decrease in art meetings per pupil in 2020. So we were at an average of 3.1, which is an average of all the counties and both the higher schools and primary and secondary school. We were down at 1.8, which is not that bad given the complete lockdown of the cultural sector. And the main reason why it was possible to have such still run an offer was that that the cultural school bag is integrated as part of the education, and schools, of course, they were prioritized the whole time during the pandemic as something that one would want to keep at them as active as possible. And then the cultural school bag was part of the system and was then the schools had like a much higher each school would be could decline a visit if they found it too demanding in the situation that they were. Normally it's mandatory, but now it was not mandatory, but still it was part of education. So artists that were working, both in sort of more in the cultural field, like museums, theater, concert hall, would experience that all their activity on this scene were cancelled while it was still running in the cultural school bag. So there was a while where the only physical art and cultural events that was happening in Norway was happening in the cultural school bag. And for some counties and municipalities, it was a really good, not a good period, of course, but it meant a closer collaboration with their colleagues in education, and also a sort of, I guess, acceptance that they're part of education and not something on the side, as much as maybe one could have the feeling of sometimes. So what was the cultural school back during COVID? It was a digital adaptation of existing shows. So it means like just filming something, filming a performance. It was pure digital production that was where it was created with this media from the beginning. Some activities happened outdoors, like you would tape out the spots where the kids could stand and do it in the schoolyard. There was reduced numbers of audience, so although there were some activities, much less pupils would participate. And of course, there was a lot of postponements and cancellations, and it was a very, very hard and busy time for the planners. And they've uttered that it's more demanding to do the cancellations than to do the but the cancellation is very demanding. One of the first things, I think the first thing that was the first digital offer was this infection-free dissemination of art in the cultural school bag. Here you see the former cultural minister sort of presenting it. It was a literature offer. And as I mentioned, we commissioned a report, and now I will come to some of the findings from the report. And it was also, we were at the moment where the whole thing started, we were planning our annual conference, and we thought, okay, at this conference we will talk about obviously what's happening now. Can we already now commission something so that we have some insights to discuss in the conference. And what we could see from my position was that the practices was very different from county to county. Some counties had like this sort of idea that they would not do anything digital, while others was like jumping on that train very quickly and devising new funding mechanisms to stimulate new digital productions. So what, from our perspective, we could sort of feel was that there was some competence being developed very quickly, and even sort of professionalism towards this kind of new mediation forms, while other places this competence was not happening. So it was very individualized, and there was also a period where people was very isolated. So the natural kind of meeting places where you would share your findings wouldn't happen. So we thought it was particularly important to systemize and write down some of these new insights, so that also practitioners that were not part of this kind of very innovative surroundings would have access to the experiences. So that's, I guess, our goal with this report was both to strengthen the field, to how to deal with digital dissemination in the future, but also provide administration's insight of the whole the challenges and also the big silence around the experience of the pupils, that you had even less possibility to know how, when you went in the same room as an artist, or you're not in the same room as your audience, the feeling in the room, you don't have access to it. So it was important to get this sort of pupil experience point of view into this sort of digital experience. And here you see the 3 productions that that was chosen as case studies, and they were quite different from each other. It was Demian Vitanza, who's a writer, who was in a sort of team format as we are now, and he was you know, like I am. I don't see you, I'm just talking, but and his theme was quite a strong one. It was about a guy who had fought in Syria and that he had interviewed in prison. And in these sessions, the former fighter he was also present. So it became a sort of very strong team and a very sort of intimate digital meeting in a way. And then Lost and Found production was a live transfer of a theater show, and with also a chat function, so that the pupils could interact in the chat anonymously. So it was also a show that dealt very well with this sort of GDPR questions, and but still had this sort of live art in a digital format. And the last one tried something completely new, which was to just make a sort of, let's say, movie-based movie-based presentation of cultural heritage, where it was 3 short movies where you could have discussion in the classroom afterwards, but it wasn't dependent on the professional art educator or artist being present. So the school could use it more like a teacher could use it whenever it suited his or her time schedule, which is a very strong change of practice in relation to how the cultural school bag normally is, where the schools cannot choose the time. They just get this sort of like, okay, Tuesday, 10 o'clock, this is coming. While here was like kind of, okay, this link, I can use it until February, okay. And I can already tell you that the problem that arose in the report was that at the time when that nobody had used this film, while at the time when the researchers needed to do the interviews with the pupils. So there's less control when there's less sort of a mandatory kind of setup. Yeah, so now I have this lots of interesting reports from the insights from the report. What was reported from the producers and practitioners and artists was that the digital dissemination requires a wide range of competence and also different competences that they might have in-house. And it was also a very strong feeling that you have to think digital possibilities from the start, that the production that was originally thought as physical on-site, that was just sort of adapted to digital format, had was often flops. And there were sometimes some battles, I would say, between artists that really wanted to do something different and new, and they were like put into a sort of like, no, we're going to do a concert, we're just going to film it, and then when you lose the sort of live interaction, then the experience change. And also what we could see was that the challenges was very different from in the different fields of art, and that the kind of the winner, if one can say, was the field of literature, where there's a lot of dialogue-based art mediation, and here there was a sort of intimacy and closeness through the digital media that was opened up for very significant experiences and exchange, while music, and for instance, was struggled a lot to find a way to function in the digital format. And we see also that in the literature field of literature, there's a much more continuation of doing sort of digital experiment also after the pandemic. So the next slide is about insights about interaction. I think maybe from my point of view, that's something I think is, I want to say eye-opener, but maybe that's too strong a word. But the Cultural School Bag have had this sort of interaction with classes, with pupils that's very group-based. Even if it's a bigger or smaller group, it's really like you're sitting together, you're raising your hand. If you have a question or an experience, you have to say it out aloud in the classroom. And what we see is that with this sort of digital interaction, we saw it also in the example I showed you earlier with the little Hvem er du, we call it, is that this more gender neutral in the digital format. There's more boys raising their sort of voices digitally. And also there's these sort of questions that you don't dare ask in a sort of assembly, while when you can put it in a chat, the threshold is lower. And the artist would say that before you would, what you lose is this kind of spontaneous question like, how much money do you make, and do you have a cat? Well, the question that you all of a sudden get in the digital format is, did you kill anyone? And of course, this is putting it a little bit on the edge because, as I told you, one of the cases was a very strong case with this sort of former soldier. But here there's a description of how the meeting changes. I'll read it aloud. They stayed behind many and asked questions afterwards. It is not common. And when they stayed behind, it means they stayed behind in teams. I think they could have lasted a very long time. It's a topic that is taboo. You rarely get an insight into something like that, and you rarely get such an opportunity of questions and dialogue. I do not think they dared to ask these questions live, face to face. It was a great advantage that it was digital. And this was also special because it was in the beginning of the pandemic. So the pupils, they were like between 16 and 18 would be in their home. So there was like one guy who had turned off, this also quote in the report, he turned off his camera, and the writer didn't really know if they were there. And then at the end, he like put on his camera, and he was like in bed without a shirt. He was like, hey, I couldn't have my camera on because I couldn't let my teacher know that I was still in bed, but this was really strong kind of. So you had like this sort of one-to-one kind of interaction happening in another way. And then the real challenge maybe is that it's a new market. You're competing when you're in a digital format. You're really competing with so much international, global, commercial content. And one experience is connected to this literature production that I just have a picture of. It's for young children, and it's that it was put out in the beginning and then of the pandemic, and it was just like everyone jumped up on it. It was very popular, and then this writer who normally would like go from school to school and have shows, and you know, like he would do, I don't know, 30 school that year and 30 school that year. All of a sudden, everyone had seen his, so he's smart. He kind of used up in a way his own market in a year. So that's the question of, can you have too much success? It changes. It's a game changer if you can move like that. And then it's a sort of competition question. How do you, with much less funds and finance, do a great thing? And the feeling generally is that things that do have a good and personal communication, things that do not have a good and personal communication do not work. And that it has to have a live element, that this sort of human meeting is at the core of the Cultural School Bag. So it's vital to it. And when it comes to insights about collaboration with the schools, it's a game changer. because when the artists are not visiting the school, then you're completely dependent on the school to have an infrastructure to accommodate and use, and remember to turn on Teams at the right moment. Otherwise, everyone experienced that they've forgotten. You're waiting in a room and the class isn't coming, and then you can start kind of looking for them, and then you find them and you can still do what was planned. Well, in this format, it's more vulnerable when it comes to how the school and the teacher is informed. So information is even more crucial than before, and it's more demanding because you need to often to communicate directly with the teacher, who will be the one turning on the Teams program. So to succeed, the whole information system has also to be adapted. But what is positive is that there's a closer collaboration between artists and teachers, which has often been very diverse, this kind of relationship. So when distributing, I think that direct calls are crucial. So there were much more direct calls between teachers and artists than normally. That barely never happens. You have like a contact in the school that the artist is communicating with. But here now it's teachers of every class maybe that you would be in contact with. And also there's a power kind of shifting, that as some artists said, that in theory you just can like push a button and then the whole show is cancelled, but I haven't heard that happen. Choosing a platform is a big challenge because they are mostly commercial, but at the same time, when you go for Teams or that kind of platforms, then the different countries have different platforms. So some artists shows like YouTube live streaming because that's accessible from every school, and there's also a lot of GDPR issues, and also what was one of the first things that arose was that we had no system to see that it's got the right fees. Some put on, there was this sort of idea that everyone had to contribute, so some artists just put on their content for free, and then it was left there. So during the pandemic, there was much more control on how long things would last, how many, and the artists would be paid according to how many viewers or how many schools would use now I'm had the offer to use the content, but all these things wasn't in place in the beginning. So that was one of the strongest and fastest learning curves. Do you say that in English? And as one artist says, instead of thinking physical logistics, we had to deal with these personal safety things that I had not anticipated. A lot was about it, would otherwise be about renting a car and technical equipment. So it was kind of time consuming. There's also the question of follow-up, that some topics are very sort of strong topics, and you might engage the students in a very sort of strong reflection, and then when you're like the theater show, that was the case, was about sexuality, and there's this sort of big concern from the artist side that if they were in the room, they could sense more if someone was strongly affected by this, and then make sure that the teacher and the school would see this pupil afterwards. While here there's this sort of a risk that you might trigger something, but nobody's there to sort of take care of the pupil afterwards. And there's also this question of skill, that some artists are coming through very well in the digital format. They're kind of winners, like with the silent film, that some actors would just do it well, while there's some people that doesn't connect that strongly in the digital format. So there's this sort of shift and also demanding new skills, in a way, skill sets. Yeah, so I just I included some talking points. I did it quite quickly, so I don't know if I like them myself, but I thought about this interaction, that is a little bit about this sort of thinking, okay, we're a community, we're discussing this together, while this sort of putting it as sort of one-to-one interaction, where you're more anonymous, but also maybe more personal. And which is maybe closer sometimes to the relation that grown-ups have to art, that they kind of have a sort of individual reflection space and are not forced to share always. And then the sort of teacher role is changing in a very interesting way. Normally in the cultural school bag, the teacher is just a host, but we need the teacher to be more of a collaborator to really give a good offer to the kids. And then logistics, that there's this sort of effectivity and sustainability in not having to travel so much, but at the same time that presence is magic. And I know that I said, let's see, I want to stop the presentation. Done? No? Yes? I was so afraid, Alexi, that I would talk too little, that I like really talked a lot. So now I'm 3 minutes more than I was supposed to be, I think.
That went really well. Really interesting. Thank you so much, Charlotte. We maybe have one question before Nora has her commentary. If you have questions or comments, please click on a hand mark up there, or just okay, go ahead, please. I can't see you.
Oh, hello. I'm Sam Gans.
Yeah, Sam, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. I work at the Cultural Learning Alliance in the UK. Thank you. That was fascinating. We've been facing a lot of the same issues, and it's really heartening to hear the same things. I was interested just that professional artistic question, where you were saying there was a lot of pushback on that, because we have a really strong voluntary arts tradition in the UK. So people who aren't professional often are very high quality. And I was just interested if you could say a bit more about that, whether it was something to do with professional artists being concerned about losing funding, or if there was something else going on. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course. I think what we have been struggling with a bit in relation to art for young audiences in Norway, and then also the cultural school bag as part of it, is the sort of question of statute when it comes to practitioners working for that group of audience. So if you have a sort of A team and a sort of B team. So, and of course, not everyone would adhere to that kind of analysis, because of course, some people would think, yes, but that's the best audience, that's where it's really happening. But from a sort of art professional centric kind of point of view, there has been different initiatives in Norway to heighten the status of working professionally as an artist with young audiences. And then things have happened the last 15 years, but it's like an ongoing work. So I think the very strong, so it's been this sort of just like that it's been said that it's for professional artists, that the professional artists are working in TBS has been important for also in the sort of with the local structure to give also the planners also this sort of thinking like, yeah, but this is actually it has to be professional. So it's been like a key also for planners. So there was a fear that it would become less status and more amateurism, I guess, from taking away this. But no, from the cultural minister's point of view, it was about acknowledging that there are a lot of very important practitioners that are not necessarily professional, especially when it comes to cultural heritage. It's not the same kind of label of professionalism, but it's not a question of quality. So that's why it was removed. It was to better encompass the whole field of practitioners and not saying that professionalism is the same as high quality. But there's so many people putting their identities as of the professional label, so it became a strong debate. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I think that status question is really important because sometimes, yes, work with children is seen as less important, and in fact, you know, they are an incredibly important audience and probably the audience of the future.
Yes, they are.
Exactly. Now we would have that was a very good question, Sam. And now Nora, you are in the office. Okay, good. She was on a train and we were kind of going through is the line okay and so on. But Nora from Finnish Concert Center now has a commentary, and she will also share some experiences from their operations in times of pandemic. So go ahead, Nora.
Thank you, Aleksi. So I'm Nora Herranen. I'm the executive director of Concert Center Finland, and I have so much to say in only 5 minutes time. So let's see how this goes. Concert Center Finland is organizing live music performances for young audiences all over Finland, and since the live music is why we exist, we had to think about how to manage through the COVID times. And since I knew that I have the commentary, I wrote something down from my own perspective beforehand, just from like a gut feeling of what's important while doing online or virtual arts experiences for schools. And it was nice to see that all of my notions were also in Charlotte's presentation and more, of course. But I wrote down beforehand that one of the important things in doing online stuff is some sort of agency of the kids, or some sort of extra work done to have the sense of sort of connection, personalization, feeling of uniqueness. This is happening only at this time, only for me. This is something unique, even though it's happening online. And I think those type of things are more important than actual technical quality, because in schools the technical equipment can be very many quality. So the sound system or the internet connection or whatever happens in between the technical part can vary a lot, but it can still work somehow if you can find some sort of connection between the arts and the audience through this platform. And I think maybe that is something that we learned during last year. We did over 65% of everything that we did online, and it means almost 1,000 events online, a huge amount. And we made this online package, which consisted of online concert, and then post and pre-material, mostly video material, pedagogical, music educational, something fun also many times. And then about this interaction part, ask the artist, which was very, very simple. Just a meeting in Zoom after you've experienced the art, because we we are a big association to some extent, but we don't have that much money. So we had to be quite inventive. And I didn't think that this was going to work very well, but we did it together with teachers. We had this pool of teachers with us thinking of how we can do it. And they thought that, yeah, we could try it. And what happened was that the online concerts, we couldn't have interaction in between those because we didn't have money to do it, because it takes a lot of money to do it, quality connection with the music while you're doing it. So we made Zoom meetings, and the teachers, many times it was hard for us to get them involved, like to come to the Zoom meeting. But if we got them there, the feedback was always very positive. And they were like, kids were asking, as Charlotte said, interesting questions through chat or through the Zoom meeting. And we had like so many lovely moments with the artists. And normally when they go to school, they have the live performances and they don't have the like connection to a certain child in the audience. They have like 150 kids. Some of them might come and talk afterwards, but they don't have time to really meet the kids. And this time they had. So in the Zoom meeting, there was something positive that we didn't have in the live performances for the artists as well. And that was something that I somehow would like to keep on, even though I still do think that it's sort of a different thing always. Like in the, as Charlotte said, I think also in one of her slides that you can do a meaningful online material or online arts experience. It can be meaningful and the connection can be meaningful, but it's sort of a different thing. There's something magic in the real presence and the connection, and that is something that you can't get. Not the same one. A different one you can get, like a very meaningful one, but not that one. So we are gladly going forward with the live performances again, but there were some things that we learned that we are executing in the normal concert scene that we're doing at the moment. But I think the platform that you choose is important to make it accessible. And for us to choose Zoom and YouTube, Zoom was impossible for some schools to use because they had restrictions on Zoom. So we had to change like the platform at the last minute or do something like that. So it's very important. But I think after these COVID times, whatever online thing you are doing, it's much, much easier because everyone has had to sort of adapt with all sorts of platforms. Maybe, yeah, in the Ask the Artist experiences that we had with the schools, I attended few of them. We had hundreds, but I attended few of them. And one, we had like improvisation a cappella group having a meeting with the first graders of school. And one girl was asking the artist that, are you a hologram? And the artist said that, well, not yet, but maybe in the future, when Concert Center Finland gets more funding, we can be there as a hologram also. They also asked a lot of interesting other questions, but this was something that sort of stick to my head. Like for a child, there was something in the future that they saw already happening, where we can maybe have one performer play something live in the school, and another one from Africa can come and attend as a hologram, and we will have ecological international art experiences for the kids in the future. I think I've used my 5 minutes already, but thank you, Charlotte, for your lovely presentation, and I hope that we can find, you know, a balance in the future where we can take it all with us, what we learned from this, and use the ones that the skills that we now have of doing that, and also remember the real life experiences and their value also. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Nora. 1,000 in UK is probably not a lot, but in Finland, I can tell you that it's a lot. It's tremendous amount of events that Concert Center Finland did, and like I think what Charlotte said, and Sam, you also kind of touched the issue that it depended, and Nora also, that it depended quite a bit on how fast you started doing things. Everyone kind of learned to do some form of digital or virtual event or workshop, but Concert Center Finland was one of the first ones immediately starting to publish things and continue employing artists. and you could see that amount of events was a reason for that fast, quick start that you did, and so thank you for that, Nora. And of course, yes, there's many things that we learned, and now we're going to switch back, and I have to remind you we're a little bit behind the schedule, but there is time in the end. I hope you have questions, and I hope you you can also write your questions to the chat box there. And but next we will go to the Finnish Observatory, and this and Eva, if you have questions or comments on Charlotte or Nora's words, please go ahead. We have Professor Eva Anttila briefly telling us about Finnish Observatory in the field of culture and arts education, and it's a really important organization for us in Finland. Our organization and Eva's organization are the founding members of this network that consists of universities representing research, and then we have grassroots operators, and it's a really big thing that we have this dialogue permanently taking place in Finland. So please, Eva, go ahead and shoot.
Sure, yeah. I will. Do you see my slides?
Yes, we have them here.
All right. Great. So, thank you for the presentations. Very interesting. In the sake of time, I know we are a little behind. I will go directly to just presenting. Maybe I should actually start the slideshow. I almost forgot this mode, right, like this. Presenting the Observatory for Arts and Cultural Education, the Finnish chapter, if we could use that word. So we are in our 5th year of operation, and thus we were founded, or this observatory was founded in 2017. And as Alexis just said, there are 2 founding members, CERADA, which stands for Center for Educational Research and Academic Development of the UniArts Helsinki, and Alexis Association of Finnish Children's Cultural Centers. And the Finnish Observatory is a member of European Network of Observatories in the field of arts and cultural education, which is the acronym for that is ENO or INO. And you can see the logos there. So we joined or applied for the membership of this ENO network, and simultaneously we connected with so very many agencies and organizations and universities here in Finland. So here you can see our cooperation partners here in Finland. We have universities that train art educators, visual art educators, Aalto University Art Education Program and University of Lapland, Faculty of Art and Design. And Serada, as you might know, maybe not, we represent mostly music education, dance education, and theater education. So we have these fields of art education represented in the observatory. Then we have a Finnish Association for Basic Education in the Arts, Finnish Association of Adult Education Centers, Finnish National Agency for Education, and also the ministry is actually even more active in our observatory than the national agency. The ministry actually supports us financially and also takes part in our meetings, and we plan events together with the ministry. And we also have Haukkala Foundation, which is a private foundation. And you can see the logos there. So this is a broad network, and it has been really wonderful to have this kind of possibility to discuss important issues and also to organize events and statements and all kinds of things that we have done during the 5 years. Here are just some information about ENO, the network. That itself was founded in 2015, so 2 years before we joined it, in Berlin under the auspices of the German Commission for UNESCO. So ENO is connected to UNESCO. Not a member yet, I don't think, but there are 13 other 13 members. I think it's going to be more this year. We have probably, I've heard, yes, 2, Norway and Slovenia, I think, are going to be joining, and plus 3 member observatories. They are like observing members, not yet organized themselves as an national observatory. And here are some of the goals of the European network. The main idea is to connect research in art and cultural education and practice, and also to make research results available to other European countries, independent from the language that the research has been made with. Goals include sharing interesting insights and approaches and developing standards of high quality research and practice too, and to initiate joint research in respect to UNESCO's goals, which you might be aware of. For instance, the Sustainable Development Goals that have been widely discussed during recent years. So all of these observatories are hosted by academic institutions, departments or facilities, but they also are connected with, or most of formed by such academic institutions, but they also are connected with an NGO or some other non-academic institution. So the idea is to connect research and practice, academic and an NGO or non-academic institution, so that there would be more implementation of research efforts and insights from research. So there are some research is initiated by NO, but most is initiated by the members of NO and then brought to NO due to awareness and shared in the network. There are some pilot projects that have been initiated within the network too. The Finnish Observatory has formulated a strategic mission for us, for the network, the Finnish network, but the mission is in line with the articles of NO and UNESCO. Thus, we seek to reinforce the equal accessibility of arts and cultural education and to improve the social status and appreciation of arts and cultural education. The aim is that high-quality arts education is accessible to everyone as a foundational value of a democratic society. Not a simple task, but a lot has been done in the regard. Our priorities until 2022, we have this kind of program agenda up till 22. The top priority has been children's and young people's arts and cultural education, but our objective is also to promote lifelong learning and arts and cultural education intended for various age and target groups. What we do is that we collect and disseminate information on the practices, research and policies in the field of arts and cultural education in Finland and internationally. And we reinforce the connection between research and practical work. And we support cooperation between the actors in the field of arts and cultural education and try to ensure a favorable operating environment in the field, which is not easy at all. And of course, the pandemic and all the economic challenges that we have faced keep us really busy. And then we promote international cooperation in the field. And I think I'm going to skip the Finnish model case. I would just keep this slide here just in case we have time, but I'm looking at the time and I think it's better to let Aleksi tell about this if you feel that it's an important case to discuss or present. But I will just close and say thank you for your attention, and I'm open to questions if there's time or later, maybe later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eva. Maybe just briefly, I can give you a link to the Finnish model for leisure activities, which is the Finnish government program, and we are working a lot with it as an association and as an observatory, because it's a huge possibility for all cultural or actors and operators in the field of culture and arts. Not yet probably working its best potential, the model, but it's starting now, and we all aim that, and the ministry as well, that it would be a permanent part of the Finnish school day. So it's a huge project. I will put the link. You can read about it in brief, but maybe just if you want continuously some information about it, we have our English newsletter, which always has its section for the Finnish model for leisure activities as well, because our association is the contact point for that model, and it's a big possibility and a chance for culture and arts operators as well as all other hobby organizers. But now let's move on. Thank you, Eva. If you have questions, you can write them in the chat, and we will let Jonas loose from Paris. Not yet red wine in his hand, but
maybe in the evening.
But yeah, I have to say before Jonas starts with Artcesters that that the role of the Finnish Observatory in advocacy work for the Finnish model has been quite big. You don't see it many often, but the role of observatory has been supporting and we've commented the preparations of that model for quite a bit and been in close contact with the Ministry of Education and Culture, and we all are very happy that the model is now running in schools around Finland. But this is the what Jonas is now going to tell us. This is the pride and joy of our association, not our program, but we are coordinating it and are really sort of the tip of the iceberg in the cultural and arts education in Finland. But no more time for me. I'll let the manager of the program speak. So Jonas, go ahead.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. I'll try to be brief. Originally, I was supposed to be talking 20 minutes, but I'm trying to cut it into 10 minutes. So forgive me for jumping through some things quickly. You're seeing my slides, right? The slideshow. Yeah. So what is Artcesters? Basically, what we do is we take every Finnish 8th grader to a trip to visit theater, concert, circus, dance, opera, or an arts museum, basically. And we also collect feedback from the 8th graders with an application. So we get feedback from them, and we can develop the skills and know-how on how to meet the needs of the young people in planning art content, and also improving the audience development and educational work related to that. One big thing is that we are not a publicly funded program. We do get money from the government as well, but our main funder is a private foundation, the Finnish Cultural Foundation, which makes this a bit different than if it would be publicly funded mostly. Of course, our aim is that someday the Artcesters program is completely funded by the Finnish government and not by the private foundations. So what we did last year, well, I'll start from the March 2020 when we cancelled everything. So when the COVID-19 hit Finland in March 2020, it was Friday the 13th. We cancelled everything from the rest of the academic year, 2019 to 2020. But in August 2020, when the previous academic year started, we decided that we'll try to organize as many of these trips as possible. We didn't want to jump on the digital train, so to speak. We didn't want to do streams or broadcast art. We wanted to offer these trips because we have a strong belief, and also from the feedback that we've gotten, is that it's an empowering thing for the youngsters, for the 8th graders, to actually get out of the school building, to travel further away from there, and it's also part of their process of becoming more independent. So we wanted to keep on doing these things. And also, of course, we also had contracts with the art institutions, so we didn't want to cancel those contracts. So we rescheduled and rescheduled and rescheduled and rescheduled, and in the end, we had to cancel a lot of things. But here you can see what we did. So in numbers, so in general, we had 67,000 people that we wanted to move and take to these art experiences around Finland. Of them, 27% we were able to get to these trips. That is, of course, not much, but then again, it's 18,000 people from whom we got a lot of positive feedback. So we wanted to keep doing this. And also the feedback we got from the artists was it was more positive than ever. For some of the artists, these things, these art testers concerts or theater shows were the only work that they had during the whole last academic year. So I think it was also an act on working on the sort of keep the live performing arts and the art museums operating during the lockdown. Well, from this, I'm not going to say a lot. I just say that basically the fall semester was better, and then we rescheduled everything for the spring because we were hoping that times would be better, but then the spring semester was even worse, so everything was cancelled again. So it was a lot of work. Visits to art museums, one class at a time, were running throughout the whole academic year. Only some cancellations occurred, and most of them happened in Helsinki, the capital area, which had the worst COVID situation. And most of the visits organized last year were to these art museums, not the theaters, not the concerts, not the circus events, because those were mostly cancelled. Well, so in August we made the decision not to jump on the digital train and keep on going. And even in November 2020, it looked we had a trip scheduled for every 8th grader for the spring period. So in November it was still looking good. We truly believed that we're going to be able to pull it off. But come December, and everything was closed again, and the situation got worse and worse. So we decided, okay, we have to do something, but since we were still holding on to the thought of organizing these trips and not letting that idea go, we decided not to go too deep into this, but to do one big thing, one big event, one big online show. So we joined our forces with the Finnish National Opera and started thinking, what could we do? In the beginning, we had a lot of crazy ideas and a lot of big thoughts on how to work on the a lot spoken interactivity and the agency of the 8th graders and everything. But in the end, we realized that it takes a lot of resource, not only money, but a lot of time and effort, which not many had at that time, because we were working our asses off, even in the opera, even though it was closed. Canceling things is a lot more work than actually organizing them, it seems. So we organized this COVID Fan Tutte online opera for the kids, for the 8th graders, and as part of this show, we used a pre-recorded, already made recording of the opera, which was made with a big money, so we didn't want to reproduce it. And we added this live discussion before and after the event, where we had 2 9th graders, opera's artistic director, the librettist of the opera, Minna, and myself talking. We reached quite a huge audience with this, and especially the recording we made of the whole thing reached even more people, and we got a lot of good feedback feedback from the schools that the recording was good because they could easily put it in their schedule. It was easier than taking part in the live broadcast version, the first thing that we did. So, and we also did a lot of pedagogical material and published From Digital Content to a Distance Art Experience guide for schools. But what we didn't do, we didn't come up with a good, solid idea of interaction. Like, how can we interact with the kids? And that's why we put more effort in the pedagogical material and this From Digital Content to a Distance Art Experience guide, because we thought that now we need to let the schools actually work on the interaction and make it more an interaction between the students than an interaction between the audience and the artist, in a way. Well, what we learned from this COVID Fan Tutte experience is that most schools were grateful that it was organized and they took part, which is of course a good thing. Most of the Finnish schools watched this. And many of them watched it together as a class or even in the school's sports hall, taking many classes or even the entire school to see the whole thing in the sports hall, which is actually funny. Noora can say about this, because also the artists' visits to schools were pretty much cancelled during the whole academic year, because it was said that no outsiders should go to the schools, and also that the school classes shouldn't be brought together. But still, many schools did it, and some made an event out of it, and this was really heartwarming. They prepared snacks in the schools. They made posters, and they organized the sports hall to look like an opera thing. They had all these like decorations and everything. And we noticed that some gave even more effort in preparing for the online event than the actual visits that we offered them in normal times. I think this has something to do with what Charlotte said, that this digital platform sort of gave the teachers also the feeling of ownership of this whole thing. Well, what comes to the artistic content, the content and the art form opera was too difficult for many 8th graders, and the duration was too long. It took altogether over almost 2 hours. Well, actually over 2 hours. And what happened was actually what we learned from one teacher that she had edited this 1 hour and 15-minute version of this thing, and telling that she removed all the unnecessary parts that would have been too difficult for the students, and it was a great success. So this way also the ownership and the agency of the teacher comes a really important thing in this kind of things. And as I said before, the recorded version was easy for the schools. They could set it easily to their own schedules. And we got a lot of positive feedback, especially from the special needs groups. Because for them, this was a lot more accessible thing than actually a visit to a theater or a visit to the opera house. Because, well, there are many reasons, and we can, of course, all pretty much figure them out, but it was more accessible in that way. But the main feedback we got was that thank you, it was really nice that we had this, but it was not a real art experience. So the schools are actually making this kind of division, saying that real art experience in performing arts is live, not something else. And in the end, I just want to say quickly that we are opening now an additional program search for this academic year, because it seems that even though things have been getting better in Finland, and they've been getting better really quick, in mid-August everything was closed, and in the beginning of October everything was opened again. So we need to adjust to these changes, but we are still going forward with this additional program search where we are looking for content and new ways to reach audience, these high school groups, in a pandemic situation where no traditional public events or physical contact between the artists and the students are possible. And even though it might be that this academic year we are able to take all the 8th graders and even maybe some 9th graders to these art visits, I still think that we need to develop this idea of more accessible art services through and using the virtual landscapes and the virtual reality and all that. But in the end, let's say we are not sure what we are looking for. And from the arts field, we're saying that please come up with whatever ideas. Let's try to come up with something new, something that is truly has meaning and truly has effort and effect on the kids. But yeah, I went a bit over 10 minutes, but thank you.
I knew you would. Thank you, Jonas. Very good. Now all the presentations are done. At least I have my list of questions, but I will leave the floor to you. There has been some questions in the chat. Aino Halli has a question. I will give it to all of you. I'm wondering how we could create the ownership feeling for teachers during normal visits. Charlotte, Jonas, others, how do you feel? Sense of ownership.
Yeah, it's the $1 million question, I think. Yeah. No. I think that what we saw in the digital format is that there's a direct dialogue between the teacher and the artist in forehand. So I think from my organization, this is not something we have decided to do, but our structure for the moment is that every school has one cultural contact who distributes information to the teachers. And that's a weak, that's vulnerable lead, as in Norwegian. Something gets lost in between the cultural contact and the teachers. So what we're developing now is also more direct communication through a digital portal, so that the teacher will have a login to get information directly. But all digital systems will have this sort of vulnerability that you would have the teacher to actually log in and have this sort of urge to do that. So in a more sort of general approach, I think that we have been very focused on the dialogue between the artist and the pupils, sort of dialogical kind of art education. But there is a very important dialogue between the artist and the teacher. And there is some training that has to happen in teacher education, which is very difficult, of course, to get a good get a place in teacher education. And in Norway, the tendency is that aesthetical subjects now have a smaller size in teacher education, while they're getting a bigger kind of focus in the schools. So we have a discrepancy between teacher education and the needs of competence in the schools. So of course, teacher education is a key, and one has to work one has to work like politically to get the teacher education better, but also on each each school. But what I think is that it's not enough. I think also the dialogue that the artist had to have with the teacher to get their project to work is also important. So I think that maybe when we send artists on tours, the awareness of the dialogue to teachers, the sort of one-to-one dialogue with teacher is something that one has to be more aware of as part of the quality, the end quality for the students. So it's also a way, I think, that the art field is perceiving sometimes and making the teacher passive. It's a mindset also. So I think that little dialogue that was established because there was a crisis can last, can be, one can take it with. Yeah. So that was a long answer for me. Sorry, that's when I don't know the answer, I have to talk a long time. Yeah.
Okay, anyone? Jonas, go ahead.
Yeah, well, that is the $1 million question. In our testers, we just this fall we started this new, how would you call it, like develop. Well, the school, we have 14 schools around Finland in which with whom we are thinking about the structures inside the school, like how the work is divided between different teachers and the principal and this arts contact person. The same system. We have the same system as you, Charlotte, that every school has one like this art like contact person that we have. So we are like, and especially when we are working with the high school groups where the class doesn't have one teacher, but we have like subject teachers. We have the maths teacher, we have the chemistry teacher, we have the arts teachers. So I'm thinking this is more of an question of the whole working culture at the school, the structure at the school, because we've noticed that if we get the principal of the school behind this whole thing, then everything works quite smoothly. But if it's only the independent teachers, it's really difficult, because then the art subject teachers actually put effort to this, but the other teachers don't. So we need the principles, we need to create structures, and we need to affect on the whole culture in the school. That's my answer.
Anyone else? Questions? Charlotte?
I want to add something when it comes to this culture in schools, because that's such a good point, Jonas. And what we see is that sometimes there's like instead of just short visits, there are sometimes a longer intervention with artists in the school. And of course, that the dilemma then if fewer children gets an offer, but at the same time, it's a way of developing a more sort of a different kind of professional attitude in the school towards art that might benefit the shorter visits later.
I'm wondering if I can ask, Charlotte, you had the slide where you had discussion topics as well. And I would like to ask, because now we have this new round of that where we are looking for new things. Like, what should we take into consideration? Like, what should the art field do in this kind of online events? Like, what could be an effective way of taking art, like traditional arts in a way, to online environments?
Well, just the first idea I had in my head, it's not an answer actually, but I thought from your presentation it was very interesting how disabled children with special needs got a better experience. So I think one really has to, I guess, think through all the good qualities that happens. And there's something about being in your own environment, the one-to-one interaction, the possibility to make maybe more pauses in between, think of an ordinary event and all the frustration that might arise in young people, not being able to move, not being able to touch, not being able to talk, not being able to run, like depending on the age group, and then think, okay, these things you cannot do in a museum, you cannot do it in an opera, but in the classroom, okay. So that's so I think that's something to think of, the sort of action space that being in a school opens, and how that can be age appropriate in another way. And then, of course, the big challenge is to have a good quality participation when you do not have a professional present. So I think this sort of good dialogue between the teacher and the professional, and also thinking in terms of physicality, tactility, make sure that those things happens even though they're not being transferred in the format. And the interesting thing, of course, is can one make something happen in between schools? We have not had that in our program, as far as I know. It's been very sort of school-centered, but that's also interesting if you can have. I know there are some projects, like Creative Europe projects, where you have one school in one country and one school in another country, and they have exchange in between. So that's also something that I think haven't been explored so much yet, but which is interesting. This sort of exchange in between students and also in between schools.
Okay, Nora, you have a question or comment. Go ahead.
Thanks. I've been thinking about a lot during this online contents and while doing them, and thinking about how to use them in the future, about the senses. Like how could you apply different senses while doing an online thing? Like you can of course see and hear something, but how can you make it more like more variety of senses? And I don't have any answers to that, but that is something that it would be very nice to sort of try to find a solution where, for example, the environment in school is somehow changed or adapted also to the digital, what's happening surrounds you, not something great with the light and sound and visual stuff, but also something happening like in the atmosphere, something magical. I don't know how that could be, like that suddenly it's cold when the snow is coming to the screen or something. I don't know, but this is something that I've been sort of trying to grasp, how to be able to do something meaningful with using all the senses.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thought. I just wanted to say, I think also when we prepare these things, like how can we activate, like you say, Nora, the classroom, so that it becomes sort of alive. This is sort of, we say something, how can we make, I don't know, the classroom, transform the classroom to a work of art, like how can we, and yeah, I think we need to be better at also involving the teachers when planning these things. That sometimes with the pandemic, the delays were so short, so everyone had to move fast. The access to teachers was also very reduced because they had an enormous workload. So a lot was, so there was like less teacher involvement and pupil involvement in production than normally. But I think now we have the possibility to work much tighter with pupils and teachers in pre-production to also activate the classroom and maybe that sort of sensuality that already exists there.
Thank you, Charlotte. I wrote down also that the stress and the workload for teachers when the pandemic started was really heavy, and for some teachers, of course, the know-how and capabilities of online teaching were a big question mark, and that way, in that perspective, I think what both Nora did in Finland and her organization, and what you did in Norway is quite remarkable, considering that there must have been a kind of a fence between everything extra to the teacher, you know, who really was struggling with just normal online teaching with all the subjects, and there must have been, it's always a question mark with the teacher, like Jonas said, that the management, and we had some comments also from South Africa, so it's a global theme, and it seems that we agree that principal and management is the first to reach, and then after that things start to roll. We are running out of time, but I'm again trying to find time for at least one or two questions if you have for any of the presenters. If you have questions, please shoot or comment on the chat box.
Alexi, can I just say while we
Yes,
wait for last
go ahead.
questions that it's been very exciting to be invited to this network, and I'm just looking at the chat and everything that's happening, different places, and yeah, it's a very stimulating morning, and I wish to know more about this network also, because it seems like a really interesting exchange arena.
Thank you, Jonas. Thank you, Charlotte. Jonas.
Yeah, my thoughts exactly, and as I'm thinking we should go towards the closing words. So I have two things. I think we should keep this discussion going on. I don't know how, but Alexi, please create some kind of structure, because I think this is really important, because I think like globally we are working with the same sort of issues and same things. So we shouldn't just be thinking this by ourselves. In Finland, we have the association that you are leading, which is a great thing because we can nationally talk about these things, but we also need this international perspective on things. I think we could avoid making huge mistakes by learning from others' mistakes and success as well. And one thing is that this pandemic situation has been, and it hasn't ended yet, even though sometimes it feels it has, but it's not over yet. So we really need to think, what have we learned, and keep in mind that this might happen again someday. So we need to have ideas, we need to have structures for that as well. So we don't need to start from scratch again if something like this happens.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for pressure, and I will gladly consider and continue this discussion, which is really important. And we have, like I said, we had South Africa, we had Lithuania, we had UK online, and maybe we could for next event hear more and discuss, have a briefer presentations and more discussion. So we will definitely continue with this. Not probably next month, but sometime. I will find a structure and give an open call for everyone who's interested. Just as closing marks, just would like to say that next month, November 16th, is the Finnish Children's Culture Forum in Lahti, Finland. It's also broadcasted live that Monday session. So you can find information from our web pages, which I will now put to the chat box to your consideration, and really would like to just in the end give a round of applause, virtual applause, and bows to presenters and all your active commentaries. So please stay online. I'll put couple of web links to you, and Jonas can probably also put the art testers. If you want to look at the info more from the web, you can find there. But